Good evening. This is CSSH 505, Making the Future, class of the Ryerson Faculty of Arts and the Chang School of Continuing Education. And it's the anchor class of the Ryerson Leadership Lab. And we're also joined tonight by our Lab Nights community of students who are connected to each other and to change making and leadership through the Ryerson Leadership Lab. My name is Kareem Bardisi. I'm the instructor for this class and the director of the lab. We've got a great first hour here for the students who are joining us who are not in the class, as well as a good number of students in the class. And with that, I will throw to Nadia, I believe. Am I right? Is that right?
Yeah.
To start us off.
Yeah, so hi everyone, welcome. My name is Nadia McNairn. I'm a work study student here at Ryerson Leadership Lab. My friend and colleague Aysha Anwar, who I think might be joining us in a few minutes. Oh hey, there you are. We helped put this discussion together with the lab as part of our Lab Night series, which are a series of recurring events dedicated to creating space for students, by students, to convene on pressing issues. And of course, this is a very pressing issue. We've noticed a lot of fear in the student community among this pandemic and wanted to address some of the things that you might be feeling. So some of you might have lost your jobs, lost stability and routine, lost the ability to keep up with new agendas and calendars and deadlines. Some of you might have had to move out of university residences or had to cope with being really far away from your loved ones. Some of you might even be feeling the weight of isolation or loneliness or losing sight of what, why, and how you're learning amidst, I guess, a lot of stresses of graduation and maybe having to readjust some of the dreams you've been having for years. Throughout this all, there's a lot of things that we don't know, and that can be very scary, but what we do know is we all don't know together. While each situation is unique, we all are facing challenges collectively. We have a voice in making things a bit easier for us and those around us. And thankfully, we're surrounded by people who are listening. Ryerson, I wanted to acknowledge, is doing a lot of efforts to support us during this trying time. President Lashemi sent out an email outlining some of the things the university's been doing to accommodate us during this crisis, like implementing a pass-fail system for classes, extending drop dates, creating web pages for students to navigate online learning. This really demonstrates that somebody is listening to us and somebody's trying to make things a little bit better. And we really do need a little more of that. Responses like this make us feel more at ease, a little more organized, and a little less fearful. We're still in the process of finding answers, or maybe just the process of finding peace with not knowing. So conversations like this are really important because they can make us feel like we have more answers on what leadership and learning look like right now, what resources are available to you, and what you can do to take action in the student community at this time. So let's listen and come together and find ways that we can act together to be there for ourselves and for other people. We will be moderated by Fahmida Kamali, who I will pass the mic off to now to give some instructions on how we'll proceed.
Hi, everyone. I am really excited to be able to moderate this conversation with Diana Brecher, who is the scholar in residence for positive psychology at Ryerson University and founder of ThriveRU, and Katrina Potkins, who is with the MindBeacon Group. We will be taking questions for Diana and Katrina over Slido. So if you go to sli.do and enter in the code SSH505, you will be able to put questions into the Slido tool. You can do this anonymously, or you can put your name to the question. And what we will do is we will answer the questions in sequence. So you have an opportunity to upvote any questions that resonate with you. And when we take a look at the Slido, we'll go in order of the questions that are the most top voted. I do want to preface this conversation by saying that while Diana and Katrina have experience working in mental health related fields, they are not necessarily going to be able to answer all the questions that the students have, particularly if there are some sensitive questions that they just don't have the information to be able to answer fully and wholesomely. We will take away these questions. We'll try our best to get questions and resources out to you, but just wanted to frame this conversation that this is a conversation around what leadership looks during this time, potentially talking a little bit about how certain policies and policy decisions are made at the university or outside of the university, and also some of the resources that are available to students and non-students alike, and how to navigate this this time, which is something that's completely new for all of us. So what we'll do is we'll quickly just go on to Slido. I'll give folks a few seconds to upvote any questions that you see that are relevant. We are running a poll on Slido, kind of asking how you're feeling right now, how you're doing. Brilliant will also be running some polls on Zoom in a bit, but we'll go ahead and we'll take our first question from Slido. So the first question comes from Maya Amistoy. Hi, Diana. Do you think schools are doing enough to support students' mental health during this time? If not, what other resources could be offered to improve?
I think it's a very good question to just state that and it's unprecedented for everyone. So when we think about what, for example, Ryerson or any other university can do for students, I expect that there was an initial scramble as news was changing every day. The university was trying to, or by phone. Because the situation is changing so quickly, my expectation is that the leadership had to figure out how to deliver something across a very broad band of students, thousands, in a very short period of time. So I want to really acknowledge, I think that the university has done an incredible job in the first 2 weeks to figure this out, because it was delivering courses and services. I think universities are really trying across the board, from what I'm aware of, to do what they can. But I think we need to hear from students as well. In this situation, we benefit from A, B, and C. And if you communicate that, my guess is the administration will be very responsive. But we may just not know that that is a need that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Diana and Katrina, I should have, I forgot to do this, but I wanted to also ask you both to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about the work that the both of you do and the groups that you are a part of.
Sure. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure, I'm happy to. So good evening, everybody. Thrilled to be here. Very important conversation. I think mental health is always an important conversation, but we are all certainly in a period of uncertainty. And I think that somebody had mentioned before that we're all feeling the same things. As mentioned, my name's Katrina. I am an account executive at MindBeacon Group. And Beacon is a digital mental health platform. We provide cognitive behavioral therapy that's therapist assisted, and we work very, very closely with post-secondary education. We're a program that is available through Ontario Shores. We support over 100,000 different students across Canada. And we've spent a lot of time working with students very closely to develop our program further. Where we are right now is very unprecedented times. I think that we will start to see a huge shift in our entire culture. I think that's understated. But I think that we're also going to see a shift in how we connect with each other. The connection has never been more important than it is now. And we need to keep those lines of communication very, very strong. So in working in a digital mental health platform, we're working around the clock to figure out how to expand our support services to meet all Canadians' needs, but certainly looking at how we can support students as well.
So my background is actually a little different. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've worked at Ryerson for almost 29 years now, and the first 25 of them was in the counseling center as the director. And about 4.5 years ago, I started the ThriveRU program, which is really looking at how can I help students be really resilient by teaching them skills around resilience that is kind of like front loading the skills. So before you need it to learn it, and then when you do need it, it's in your toolbox and you can activate it. And so I conceived of resilience as having 5 key components. Mindfulness, which is about the ability to be really present. Gratitude, which is paying attention to the good things that are happening amidst all the bad, which is an interesting skill set in these days. Optimism and hope, self-compassion, and grit, which is another term for perseverance. And so I've created a training program that's associated with those 5 things. And when I reflect on the challenges of COVID, I think all of these skills could be very helpful in facing the day-to-day challenges of the unknown, what's tomorrow going to bring.
Thank you for sharing, both of you. We have another question from Daniel Safran. How do you suggest students cope with family members who may not be taking recommended measures as seriously as they wish you would? So I'm reading into this question a bit, but assuming that the conversations around social distancing, people might have loved ones who are not taking this seriously. Do you have any advice to give to these students? And the both of you can answer.
I can jump in quickly, and then I think this will be a fantastic question for Diana to comment on as well. I think that there is so much concern now about connecting because we can't connect in person anymore, and for the time being, which is what we're totally used to. And I think we're also very, very concerned about our parents and their health. I have now developed a pattern of calling my dad twice a day, which is way more than I ever have talked to him. But it's just a 5-minute call, and it's now become routine. It's not a long, drawn conversation, but it's now, lunchtime, and then as soon as I'm done work, I give him a call. And it's actually been kind of one of the silver linings in the last 2 weeks that I think have come out of having these feelings of concern and really wanting to feel that connection. I think, have to shift a little bit to realize that we can still connect on such a great deep level without it necessarily having to be in person, which we're a little bit more used to. Diana?
Several things came to mind when I heard the question. And I want to kind of preface it with this. Human beings have a natural tendency, and it's an instinct, that in the face of danger, when we perceive that we're in danger, we engage in fight, flight, or freeze. And that's kind of like the very primitive part of our brain. Think back to our ancestors on the Serengeti, and there's a lion coming. You're either going to run out of the way, try to kill it, or try to hide in such a way that it doesn't see you. And that's survival, okay? So the thing that's going on with COVID is it was insidious. It crept up on us at first. So it was possible to engage in denial, to say it doesn't apply to me, or it won't happen here, or it won't be as bad, or I'm not in a high risk group, or whatever you say to yourself. And I'm a pretty cautious person, but nonetheless, I was engaging in some degree of denial until about just over 2 weeks ago. So I was taking the subway, I was going to work, I was swimming in the pool, I was going out to dinner. I was acting like life was normal. And then Wednesday night a week ago, I sat down in my living room and it was like the ceiling fell down on me. And I was sitting in the rubble of my own awareness of, oh my God, this is serious. And here's the truth. I think that each person will come to that moment of awareness at a different point in time. And if you're feeling threatened, one of the ways to step away from the danger is to pretend it's not there. So my guess is there are some people who are not listening to the news and who are not talking about it and who are acting like it's not happening as a way of dealing with their own fear of being threatened. And what they need to do is to get with the program. And how do you force someone to step out of their own denial? It's very hard. Maybe one way to do it is to talk about your own vulnerability in reference to their risky behavior. So if you say, the more you put yourself at risk and bring it home to me, I'm now afraid, and you're putting me at risk. And so it's relying on the relationship to maybe help the person make the connection that they're not an island, that they're all connected. We are all in this together, and we are dependent on each other. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Thank you, Diana. Just to help with your bandwidth issues, I've turned off my video so that there will be less freezing for you. I see that Daniel is here. Daniel, if you want to unmute and follow up to that question, you can feel free to do so.
Yeah, Diana, that's absolutely useful, and it really resonates with me, that idea of building on the relationship, right? Building from within and not really coming as an outside force, kind of imposing something, some uncomfortable news on someone. Rather, it comes from a place of love and not, from another angle. So I found that very helpful. Thank you.
I would just add that it's, the reaching out and the connection is both in terms of the love and connection you have with that person, and also your care and concern for their well-being, not even connected to how much they're putting you at risk, but they're putting themselves at risk, and then other people.
Thank you so much. We have another question here, and it's, again, the both of you can weigh in on this one. Do you have advice for students that are conflicted between needing to stay informed and feeling the weight of information overload? So there's been a lot of conversation about information overload, and as in the Leadership Lab, we're also realizing that there is a part that maybe we can play in providing information and resources to students right now. So what we're actually going to do while you answer this question, we'll also be running a poll asking the students on the line, what resources do you need right now? So that we can follow up with Diana and Katrina after this as well. So again, the question, I'll repeat it for both of you. Do you have advice for students that are conflicted between needing to stay informed and feeling the weight of information overload?
Mm-hmm. So I can jump in first. I think that's a very, very common question that we're all struggling with right now. It's sort of like a train wreck. You're curious to see, but at the same time, it's very, very disturbing and difficult to be constantly listening to negative news. MindBeacon actually has provided a bunch of resources that have been developed by our clinical team. And one of them is strategies for uncertain times. And it's talking about how to protect your mental health in times where there's so much distressing news. I think that this is another great call or question for Diana and myself. I'm not a clinician, so she will have some fantastic advice for you. But there are also other resources that I'm happy to share, and we'll make sure that you have at the end of this session. Beacon is right now, again, very committed to making sure that we're supporting the best way we can. And that means that we're developing resources as we move through this pandemic. Right now, the concerns and the fears that we have might be very different from what we're feeling and what we're experiencing in a week from now. In the meantime, again, that's a very, very common concern that I think we're all a little worried about.
Yeah, okay. So my response is this, like there will be some variation between people who can digest enormous amount of information, process it, and put it aside so they can focus on other things. And there's some of us who have a very limited capacity that it's too distressing. So you have to kind of honor who you are and know who you are. But one recommendation I do have is, since things seem to change day to day, it's helpful to know once a day at least what the big news is for your safety. And then do your best to focus on something that's really important, engaging, and meaningful for you, that you value. I think in a time like this, it's so important to not stop living. You know, I have some people in my life who are just literally spending 24/7 on news diet. Like they're just reading and process. It's too much. So that's what I do. I start in the morning, I check what happened overnight. And I do have a second check in the evening, but not just before bed. I'll turn on a trusted news station and I'll listen, or I'll go to a website that I think is really relevant. And that's it. It's not my job to figure out the rest of it. And then it's about, can you have a quality day? Can you decide what are the 5 top most important things to you to do today that are kind of your health non-negotiables? Things that are, you know, is it exercise? Is it eating well? Is it connecting to someone you care about? Is it doing something really stimulating and interesting? And have some structure to your day that actually makes it all manageable. And then let the news be the news. And until you have to do something about it, it doesn't have to take over your whole day.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for that. You alluded to doing things that keep you healthy. We're asking a poll on Zoom right now around physical movement because we know that physical movement can be tied to your mental health. How are you making substitutions to ensure physical movement during COVID-19? So those on the Zoom, please take a moment to answer the poll so that we can collect this data. There is a question from Yasmin online, Yasmin Mohammed. What are some activities or exercises people can do to help ease or control anxiety or depression they might have as a result of self-isolation or distancing? So Diana, do you have any specific examples of what people can do? And Katrina, if you have anything to contribute, please feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is really tapping into what is your normal practice. So for example, do you lose yourself in a book, a really engaging novel? Is that a way for you to kind of push the anxiety aside? Are you a meditator, and do you need to just decide with some degree of discipline, I'm going to meditate every day for even 5 minutes? Again, what that does is it really helps with kind of activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calm part of the brain sending messages to calm yourself down. It's engaging in exercise. So the anxiety doesn't sit all in your body, but you actually work it out through your body, through movement. It's getting fresh air. So it's all of those self-care things that can be really helpful. Anxiety is about the perception of risk or danger and the belief that you can't cope with it. And so clinically, the way you deal with anxiety is you challenge those perceptions of risk. Are they really as dangerous as you believe? And what resources or coping strategies do you have to manage those? So part of what we need to do when we're faced with anxiety is, I mean, there's a lot of things outside of our control. Me too. I mean, it's no one's exempt here, no one. So it's about engaging in self-care in such a way that you're helping your body manage chronic stress. So we are in a chronic stress situation. So you have to give yourself breaks from that stress in order to keep going.
Thanks, Diana. So there are a few questions actually related to this next topic. So for a lot of students, this might be the first time that they are working from home 100%. Or maybe their work involves them being at home, not being able to leave the house. So there are questions around how to be the most productive when you're at home and you're not used to that environment. So do you have any advice to students who are struggling with this a bit, some tactics that they can use? Again, the both of you can feel free to answer this question.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I as well am working home for the first time and working longer hours than normal, just being in a digital mental health space. And what I found has been extremely helpful is getting dressed in the morning, getting ready for work. I know that we all know that already, but there's always that difference between theory and practice, and practice has really made a big difference. I also have found that I've developed little routines that make me really happy. I talk to my sister every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. We have our coffee, we get ready for the day together. I take a lunch break. Another thing that I found has been incredibly uplifting is I miss my coworkers. I miss being able to, and in a student environment, be with my colleagues or my fellow students. So we set up times to Zoom and just talk about nothing. We eat our lunch together, or we'll just sit and chat about what's new for 15 minutes. So I think making the day as normalized and as structured as possible has been really beneficial.
You touched on several of the things that I was going to say. Neil Pasteur is the Canadian author who wrote a book, The Happiness Equation. And in his book, he talked about 4 things that people really need. This is actually in reference to when you retire and leave the world of work, what do you need to replace that you were getting from the world of work? And I thought what he narrowed it too much. It's really for everybody all the time. And he refers to it as the 4 S's. So S as in structure, stimulation, social, and story. So every day you need to make sure you have some kind of structure to your day. So dressing properly at the beginning of the day is a really good thing. I wasn't doing it at first. I was kind of walking around in my sweats. That ended. So structure in terms of when are you working or studying, and when are you able to put it down and have some time off? Because how do you know? The boundaries are all blurred. So you have to create a schedule structure for yourself. Secondly, you need to have connection. So having that morning coffee with your sister or lunch with friends or coworkers. I go for a walk and I talk to my friends when I'm walking. So I'm I'm double dipping there. You need stimulation. You need something that's going to be engaging either your creative energy, intellectual energy, something that's going to be a challenge and engaging to do that. So build a project that you want to do. Start learning. I know someone who decided she wanted to learn German. So she's taking German lessons while she's in lockdown. And then finally, some kind of story. His term is story, but it really means being part of something bigger than yourself, or belonging to something that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning. So maybe it's, you know, in some cases I've heard students are volunteering to go grocery shopping for people who really shouldn't be out and about because they're either in self-isolation or they're elderly, or you're going to volunteer to do something to help someone somewhere. That sense of giving to others is a great way to feel good and grounded in yourself.
Thank you so much, Diana. I think this next question you could actually answer. It's a little bit related to some of the skills that you were talking about building resilience. So this question is from Sarah Marks. Many of us are struggling to adapt to new norms. How can we build resilience when faced with this crisis? What does a resilient person look like at this time? There are also some other related questions. Sorry, Berlin, do you mind muting this person? Sorry, there's just somebody else who is speaking and I can hear them. There are also some other questions related to this question about what does a resilient person look like at this time. Some folks are asking, how can we think about a positive future with all the information that folks are getting and you know, some of the impacts on mental health? It can be hard to think positively about the future. So maybe can you speak to both of those points? See that Diana's, oh, yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of what does a resilient person look like, you know, in many ways we're all have to be resilient because every day we have to bounce back from really bad news. But how much does it cost is really what it comes down to. So a resilient person who is better able to not worry too much about the future, but really try to stay in the present. That kind of mindful awareness of the present can be very helpful in resilience. Engaging in an exercise of gratitude. With my team, we've started to identify 4 things we're grateful for every day, even in the midst of this catastrophe. Maybe it's something as simple as, I don't have to engage in a 2-hour commute, right? I mean, so yes, you're not getting to go where you want to go, but you don't also have to be exhausted at the end of the day. So things that you're grateful for sometimes really helps balance the scale a little bit. Also being grateful for so many of the people who are putting their lives on the line, like the healthcare professionals and the grocery clerks and from all over. So, you know, there's a big web out there of people who are being very self-sacrificing. Acknowledge our gratitude towards them, even just in our own minds. Hope is really important. And so we have to hope that there's going to be a vaccine. We've got to hope that we collectively, at least in Canada, did what we needed to do soon enough so that we can flatten that curve and it doesn't turn into, this is a really tough time, and you have to forgive yourself for getting cranky or agitated or upset when it's just too much, because it is too much. So, you know, the stay calm and carry on phrasing that I think came out of World War II in London in the Blitz is a great phrase to be aware of most of the time, and then give yourself permission to lose it occasionally, because that's just what you're being human. And then finally, you have to figure out how you're going to have to keep going, because this might last for a long time. So you have to engage in that kind of, this is where I'm referring to grit, the capacity for stamina, to say, it's not over yet, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm not going to give up, and this is going to be okay. And it's what we say to ourselves instead of imagining, oh my God, I can't bear this anymore. That's not very useful because it's not up to us anymore. So it's really, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do, but you asked what a resilient person looks like. I think that's what a resilient person would look like. And I have to be honest, I can't remember the second question.
It was about being being positive and hoping for a positive future, but I think you've been able to address that too.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you. Katrina, this question is for you. What do you think community can look like in virtual environments? There's also a related question around how do you recommend that we practice social solidarity while social distancing? Is there anything that we can do beyond just calling friends and family?
Yeah, those are two really fantastic questions. To the first one, I would say that I think, again, the way that we are connecting has already changed within the last 2 weeks. As Diana mentioned, at this point, we don't really know how much longer we are going to be in isolation, or we're going to be physically distancing. So I think that we are going to be adapting in a way that is kind of unforeseen. We don't really know exactly how we're going to be responding to digital or virtual. But I think that we're learning in a very short period how impactful it can be for connections. I've used Zoom and video chat more than I ever have and I feel that it makes an enormous difference in just being able to see social cues and look at look at other people while we're talking. In terms of the second question, that's a bit difficult for me to answer. I think it's to be seen, but I do know that we're already starting to see lots of different businesses or social groups respond in a way that we never would have if we weren't experiencing social distancing. I just saw an advertisement for a dance party on Saturday. That's a virtual dance party where there'll be a live DJ. So I think that there's little things like these that'll continue to develop. Communities are going to come together. We're very adaptable as humans, so we'll certainly see things evolving in ways that I'm not sure that we can really predict at this point.
Awesome, thank you. Diana, there's a question here. You had said that that students should be giving feedback to the universities about what they'd like, what resources that they need. I believe it was you who said that. Yeah. They are asking now, the students, what is the best method to get this information about what they need in front of the decision makers or the people who have access to resources?
Mm-hmm. To some extent, it will depend on the nature of the need. So if it's around academic, grade accommodation, transcript, graduation, all of those types of things, that would probably, you'd start with the registrar, I guess. If it's more around things like needing appropriate equipment, like I know the library was giving out lots of laptops for students who didn't have access to laptops. The whole university is still open, it's just not in the bricks and mortar anymore. Everyone's working from home, so the librarians are still available, student learning support for students in managing the transition to online learning and all of that. All of those things are still available, and I think being delivered often through Zoom or through emails and such. If it's an issue related to mental health or student well-being, you would go through the Student Wellbeing Department, the director of which is Alan McDonald. So there are, basically you would go to the same places you would go to if you were walking to an office, and you would ask for the resources that you want, and to make it known that this is an issue. So I don't think, it's kind of hard for all of us to imagine this, but everyone's still working. We're just doing it from a different place. But I think, you know, for example, if a faculty member is being very rigid and you're having difficulty, then you need to contact the chair of the department, and then the chair will direct you to whoever would be the person who would solve that problem. So I know, for example, that there's some students who said, you know, I just can't transition to online, I'm gonna have to drop out. And so they said that to a professor, and the professor said it to the chair, and the chair said, no, we're going to do what we can for you so that this doesn't have to happen. And then they will help the student navigate so that they don't lose the semester because of COVID-19 and everything that's happened. So I think you'll find that if you need to have your request, if you can make your request, there's someone there who's going to listen and help you figure it out. I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure.
Thanks, Diana. There are a few questions here about how to support family members who might be dealing with mental health issues. Now, I know that you can't speak to any specifics, and just clarifying for folks on the line, we're just not equipped to be able to answer all the really specific questions on certain mental health issues. I am noticing that there is one around helping a family member or a loved one who is having suicidal ideation. But there's a question actually here from Nathan Emmanuel, who asks, my parents have been reading / believing news that is misinformed or fake, causing them to be stressed and paranoid. What can I do to help protect their mental health? Katrina, if you want to take this one first, and Diana, feel free to add.
So again, I'm not a clinician myself, so I feel like I'm not equipped to answer that question. There are, and I'll leave this for Diana. I will just make a note that we're all experiencing things that might feel different, but I think that a lot of us are experiencing a lot of the same concerns, and I think having family members who are feeling paranoid is quite common. I know I have one. And there is a ton of resources. I would say that CAMH has a fantastic website that's being updated continuously. And there's a lot of support there for these types of questions, as well as MindBeacon. And Diane, I think this is a good one for you to answer if you don't mind.
What I'm imagining in terms of the misinformation that your parents are hearing is it's causing them to be more alarmed than perhaps necessary. That's what I'm kind of assuming. So there's nothing better than the actual facts to reassure people. So if, for example, you were able to challenge the misinformation with real data because you have a credible or reputable source, that might be helpful. The other is, and reassure them that no matter how good they are, they're going to help them be okay. So none of us have any answers. Maybe some people, you know, who are major decision makers in public health have some answers, but the average person, we really don't know what's going on. We don't know when it's going to end. And so the best you can do is to stand in solidarity with the people you love and tell them that you're with them and you're in this together, and you'll try to find out if what they believe is actually true, or maybe there's new information that challenges it. There's no easy answer to this, but I think the solidarity and the sense of connecting can go a long way to help reassure people who are feeling really frightened.
Mina, can I weigh in on this one as well?
Sure.
So from a public policy and leadership standpoint, there's another piece of this which is really important, which is that we can help build systems that push people to the right information. A lot of the systems actually conspire against that. So people who are consuming information through private media channels. And by private, I mean secured end-to-end, but not things that can be seen by others. For instance, WeChat, some certain messenger platforms, WhatsApp. Those are places where misinformation can grow and spread. And actually, as a leadership, as a think tank, this is an area that we are hoping to do some work in. And there's another group at Ryerson, the Social Media Lab, which is doing some really important work in this as well. So there are places where this kind of misinformation lives. Some of it's in the mainstream media. I think people who are following the American political scene know that Fox News is one of those places, or can be one of those places. But they live in lots of different places, and we actually can we can help push people towards more credible sources. Many of you received Aysha's student newsletter earlier today, and in that we put some credible media sources. And they're really on the health side, you really got to start and not end with, but you got to start with the chief public health agency of Canada and the chief medical officer of Ontario and Toronto, or the region where you live. These are the not only they're the official authorities as well as the unofficial authorities. So not only do they have the knowledge, but we as a society have decided through the powers that we give these people, especially at a time like this, that they are the ones from whom we're going to take certain forms of direction. And that's just something really important to note. And on the media side, again, in the newsletter, we pointed to some important media sources that are discussing this issue in a more granular way. Now, there's another angle in this, and we can get at this in the second hour, which is there's the misinformation, just the lies around how the virus spreads and whatnot. But then there's the more kind of the less misinformation that's a bit harder to unearth, like the statement that we can all go back to work at Easter time, or on the other hand, that we are going to be shut in for 18 months straight. These are assertions that are kind of, you can pull out of, these are interpretations. Both of these are extreme interpretations of what the public health authorities are saying. And you need to actually then get to the journalism, you need to get into the public policy conversation, you need to get into the places where power is being built to actually engage in those questions. And again, not all family members are going to do that. That's part of our responsibility to understand how those official authorities put out information, and then what the work is of other people who are not the official health authorities, but have other things to do to help contribute to the recovery that we need. So sorry, a long intervention, but one I thought that was important to make.
Thanks, Kareem. Just being conscious of the time, we're almost at 7. Are there questions that you wanted asked that you didn't think we got to yet?
I liked the, sorry, I was just looking at the Slido questions, and I liked the vulnerability question. How can we invest in vulnerability in ourselves and our culture? How can vulnerability during this time of COVID-19 bring us closer to ourselves and to others? I think that's a useful thing for us to discuss.
Awesome.
But
yes, let's ask this question. So this is an anonymous question. They're asking, how can we embrace vulnerability in ourselves and in our culture? How can vulnerability during this time of COVID-19 bring us closer to ourselves and to others? So again, both of you can feel free to take a gander at this.
Sure. So I'm happy to start, and then again, very thankful that we have Diana to provide the clinical advice. I've found that there have been moments where I've felt that vulnerability, and it's really allowed me to reach out. And I would say that's the same for my family and my friends. I think that the one piece that really is connecting everybody right now is that we're all experiencing the same concerns. And so it's I think natural for us to connect at that point. And I would say that that is that's one of the again, silver linings in being in a environment where we need to physically distance right now. We're all feeling scared and uncertain, and it's creating more connection.
I had a friend say to me the other day that social distancing is the wrong term. It's actually physical distancing, social connection. And that's really building on what you just said. I think that, you know, it's hard to feel vulnerable, and it's hard to feel vulnerable to something invisible. And so it really challenges our normal way of being in the world, where we just say, you know, I'm strong, I'm empowered, I can do what I want to do, want to go where I want to go. And all of a sudden that's not really that's not the story anymore. And so this is where I think a lot of self-compassion has to come in, which is like, yeah, we're going to all feel vulnerable, and that's our universal experience. And so there's power in that vulnerability. And that's what's actually making everything work as best as it's working right now, is that we're all buying in to the same vulnerability and the kind of civic responsibility of taking care of each other by staying away from each other. It's like there's so many contradictions built into that, but I think that's where we are today.
Can I, Fahmida, can I jump in with a question? I don't know if it's been asked in this way.
Yes, please.
So both Diana and Katrina in different ways are experiencing your practices changing or evolving. Can you just speak about, because it's a question about individual therapeutic relationships, but it's also a broader question. How is, just talk to us about the merits and the limits of the delivery of mental health services remotely versus the in-person. Because I think that's something that a lot of people here are going to want to understand, even if not everyone here is lucky enough to have the access to the full suite of services. It's something that we're going to want to at least understand and potentially access.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned early on, I work for an organization that provides digital mental health. We are 100% digital, which means that all of the communication that takes place between the clinician, who's a dedicated clinician, so similar dynamic between clients and their therapist, except for it takes place completely through messaging. Not instant messaging, but much more like writing letters back and forth. And I think probably one of the absolute most common questions we get is, how does a clinician make a connection to their client when they don't have that traditional in-person setting? The interesting thing is that what we find in terms of the satisfaction that we measure on multiple fronts of our platform, the satisfaction between the individual and their clinician is always the very highest. When we receive comments that come back from our clients on what they got out of our program and what they were really thankful for, I would say 90% of the time they're thanking their therapist for being supportive while helping them to develop coping and resiliency skills. So I think it really challenges what our ideas are around human connection, and that it has to be in person or it has to be face to face. I think that there's many different ways to connect, and what works for one person may not work for another, but there's a lot of benefits that come from being connected to somebody and talking about very, very sensitive and very personal issues when you are not necessarily sitting face to face. So I think that we are at a time right now where we are having to make a bit of a shift. We can't rely on in-person counseling in our support in the same way that we had previously as of the last 2 weeks. And I think that we will come to an understanding that connections and therapy and the support that we need can be provided in many different ways and just as effectively.
Great, thanks. Diana?
I'm not working as a therapist right now, but I worked for many, many years as face-to-face therapy. I've never done it digitally or even through Zoom. And so that's part of what I think had to be the shift, is people who've trained in a particular delivery of treatment had to shift into something else. Shifting to the phone, most therapists now are delivering by phone or through some kind of Zoom or Google Meet or whatever. I think it's a good substitution. Given the times, it's better than nothing. But for people who are trained to deliver it in person, it may take some time for you to be able to really replicate your best work. But that being said, I think we are so lucky that there are alternatives. So instead of just saying, sorry, can't see you at all, can't do anything, therapists, and I've been on all kinds of listserv where people are trying to figure out the most secure way to have a therapy session online to make sure to maintain the confidentiality of the client and all of those things. Those are concerns professionally. Is that I think that, you know, it's the benefit is it's access. The downside is there's an adjustment period. And I think that adjustment period will pass, and then people will be, you know, it's like learning to do something with your left hand after you did it with your right hand for a long time. Eventually, your body takes over and you learn how to do it. And people will get much better at it. And if we need it to last for a long time, then they'll be able to do either quite well. For the client, I don't know what it feels like. It might feel, you're saying that the relationship made a huge difference, and that's great. I don't know what it's like to be on the other end of a client talking to a therapist online, but I'm sure it's better than not having anything, for sure.
I don't this is for the class. We used to assign in this class a reading from David Byrne, the musician and founder of Talking Heads, in a book about music, about how important where the music is played affects what the music is. And it's not like, Braylon, do you remember that chapter? Anyway, I will send it back out to folks in the class. Fahmida, do you want to do a last question and then we'll hand off to Laura?
Sure. Let me just take a quick look through. Okay, so there's a question here. It's from Tolga. What could our reaction to the pandemic through self-isolation or physical distancing say about the improvements that could be made for mental health services? So I know that there was a character limit here. Tolga, if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to, if you want to expand on your question, feel free to do that. I'll give you a couple of seconds. And if not,
hello.
There you are.
Can you hear me or?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so I just wanted to expand on the question and just say that, you know, how do we know that mental health resources won't make us feel as isolated as we say we are? Because we are in self-isolation, but if there's a possibility that these mental health resources may not be able to make us feel less isolated and don't make us feel like we're being helped psychologically during these difficult times, because historically this is a very different time for us. So if these mental health resources may or may not help specific people, how could it be improved is the question I was trying to ask. Yeah.
Okay. Diana, I'll answer quickly and then I'll pass it over to you. I think that's an excellent question. And the reason being is that I think you hit the nail on the head, in that we're navigating through uncharted waters, which is why I think one of the benefits of digital mental health or virtual mental health is that it is very conducive to pivoting quickly. So we learn from our users, we learn from our clients, and we mold and we shift based on the feedback that we receive. We at our organization are putting together resources by the moment. Literally, our clinicians are working really, really hard to make sure that we're responding to the different concerns and fears that are coming up as they come up, because they're shifting. So I think that being that this is such uncharted territories, I think that there's a lot for us to learn, and that we have the ability through digital platforms to adapt very quickly.
I'm not sure if my answer is going to be very reassuring, but it's what's occurred to me is that therapy, no matter how effective it is, cannot change the external reality that we're living in. That's the constraint. And so you can talk to a therapist and learn skills and get a lot of reassurance and support. But at the end of the day, the reality outside is the reality outside. And so some of this is just about adapting and doing your best to kind of tread water until things get better. So I think that it's important to have a realistic expectation of what therapy can and can't do. It cannot change the epidemic we're in, the pandemic we're in. What it can do is help us cope better while it's happening. And so if that's your expectation, then I think therapy can be very helpful. But it can't do, like, there are real limits to the power of a therapist or the therapeutic process.
All right, thank you. That was very informative. Yeah, definitely. We do have to prepare for these uncertain times, but I am fairly optimistic about the therapeutic field when it comes to therapists and psychiatrists. So yeah, I do agree with you. Yeah, but I'm optimistic. I think we can slowly begin to adapt to these new changes as soon as possible. It will be a slow process, and it will take lots of patience. But thanks for answering the question.
Thank you so much. Just again, being conscious of the time, and I know our speakers will want to get to their dinner. Kareem, do you have any last thoughts before we close off the session? Or Berlin?
No, but I think, thank you so much. Thank you, Katrina and Diana. We're going to send around some of these resources. And I know Laura in our class, who's working with Susanna and Sarah, we had asked Laura Londino to say a few words as well in conclusion.
Yeah, thanks Diana and Katrina for all the conversation around how to cope during COVID-19. As a past participant of Thriving in Action, I can say that it's an amazing program. And what I most appreciated from it is that it challenges us to recognize our unique, innate strengths, so what we already have and bring to the table. And I think that that's something that's really important right now, is for us to recognize what strengths are already within us and what has gotten us to where we are now in our academic career, and trying to lead from that. So that's something that I really appreciated. And I also wanted to add that the 5 skills you mentioned, mindfulness, gratitude, optimism and hope, self-compassion and grit, that I think that there's also a resource online for us to access to do activities to develop them as well, which I think is great for us to use right now if we have some free time at home, because the resources are available by video or through reading. So I can post the links on here after as well, because I think there's also a course that's available to get these skills for credit. So I think that's useful for us to access now to further develop those skills. And as Nadia summarized, the school is still available for us to reach out to for support. So it's good for us to call in or email for extra support. And I think that in alignment with the practice of optimism and self-compassion, I think this is a chance for us to reflect on our strengths and also ask ourselves what opportunities are coming out of this. You know, what skills are we having to develop out of this, and how is that making us more well-rounded people? And another big theme that I think we talked about a lot today was the idea of connecting from a place of vulnerability, and to allowing the vulnerability we feel during COVID-19 to be a way for us to express ourselves and to have that vulnerable place be seen, and how that vulnerability is such a powerful source for connection. And one last thing, I've actually accessed therapy online, and I can say that I've been in therapy in person and online, and I find that it's actually working pretty well. But the core component for it to work well is that strong therapeutic relationship. So I think there is a future for online therapy. Yeah, thank you very much for today's conversation.
Laura, I just wanted to ask, the online resource you're referring to, is that the Thriving in Action Online? You're muted.
Yeah, I have it here. I can post it in the chat.
Okay, because I was going to show the slide, but if you have it, then you can post it.
Yeah.
And anyone at Ryerson can access it. It's a very rich resource that I co-created with Dr. Dina Kara-Schaefer. And she has a lot in there on learning strategies that can be very, very helpful as you're just coming into the end of term. So I encourage you all to check it out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katrina and Diana, and we'll show our hands out of appreciation.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.